be ashamed. They ought to be ashamed. They fight over their buried ground.
Couple of minutes after 8 o'clock, welcome to a Monday edition of the Mornings with Ed show, and a beautiful, gorgeous, absolutely perfect Monday along the Orange County coastline. Wherever you happen to be listening from across the world, across the country, I hope it's equally beautiful for you as well. It's time for this morning's Artist Corner, and this morning's Artist Corner being brought to you by the Honacar Foundation for Arts and Culture. They are raising the bar of the art that we experience, and I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while here. If you've seen Edward Scissorhands, Message in a Bottle, if you've seen The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, or Batman Returns, or Ed Wood, or Little Women, or a number of other great projects, then you know the work of producer Denise Di Novi. However, there's another side to Denise Di Novi. 4 years into their fairy tale marriage, Scott Farrow, her husband, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and Scott died a year later. Well, she picked up a brush as this creative outlet to process the grief from having lost her husband, and she wants to share the message that something beautiful can come out of grief, though it might seem impossible at the moment. Denise Di Novi will reveal her artistic side on canvas when she unveils Portal. Portal is an exhibit of her paintings, and that starts August 10th. And if I'm not mistaken, that's Saturday. Yes, here at the Honacar Foundation Gallery in Laguna Beach. The exhibit runs through September 14th. Sitting in the Artist Corner this morning is Denise Di Novi. Welcome, Denise.
Thank you so much, Ed. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm delighted to have you here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story with us. And I'll tell you ahead of time before this weekend, thank you for sharing your art with us as well. I'd like you, if you wouldn't mind, to tell the audience a little bit about Scott and the love you shared. Start us off with that, please.
Well, for those of you who despair about finding love later in life after divorce or widowhood, it can happen. I was married for many years, got divorced, and went one day on online dating and met Scott, connected with him, and then, that was it. I think it was really meant to be. He was an amazing person. He was a satellite engineer at Northrop Grumman, very brilliant, very kind, and just an outdoorsman, ran marathons, hiked, 20 miles up a mountain, incredibly healthy. Just a beautiful person, and brought so much love and joy to my life. But unfortunately, it was a very short time we had together. But I read somewhere that love has no sense of time, and I think that's true. I think it's the depth and the truth of the emotion that you share, and not the amount of years, because the impact on my life was tremendous.
Okay, and I'm curious as to, after the diagnosis, what was that year like leading up to his death? After the were there any glimmers of hope, or was it just sheer panic, having to navigate the death sentence that pancreatic cancer, as many of us know, is?
Yes, I mean, when you get that diagnosis, it is basically a death sentence. And he actually lived a year and a half, I think a little longer, or a lot longer than the average. The average is 6 months, believe it or not, because we got into a trial at UCLA with immunotherapy. So I think it extended his life about 9 months, maybe. But the only glimmers of hope were that the chemotherapy was effective enough to give him somewhat of a normal life for a few months. It did, when he first got it, and the immunotherapy, it worked enough that we were able to have a trip to Europe, which we had not been able to have yet. And he had always wanted to go to Barcelona to see the Gaudi architecture. We went there. We went to my favorite city, Paris. We went to London, and thank God we had that time together and those memories. And so that was the glimmer of hope, was that short amount of time. And the rest was just, as you know, you're trying to stay alive, and then you're trying to stay out of pain. You're trying to manage the incredible difficulty of cancer, and particularly that disease. And then, you try to have what is called a good death. You
Right.
try to find a way to say everything you want to say, and share all the things that you want to share, and go as peacefully and painfully as possible.
As I told you off air here, I lost my mom to pancreatic cancer, and I want to talk about your courage here for a moment, because a partner is completely different. We expect to lose our parents at some point, but we don't expect really that expectation of losing a partner is something quite different. And for me, I've done 1,000 of these conversations, and for me, this has been the most difficult Artist Corner to prepare for. I tried to put myself in your place, and I couldn't for the life of me harness your courage. I would collapse. If this were my partner, I would collapse. I would draw the shades and live in the dark. I'd never get out of bed. I would die, miserable and alone. That's how I ended up thinking of this. How did you avoid that, and how fine is that line between succumbing to that and avoiding it?
Well, I mean, thank you for your empathy. That's really, really, that's what we need in these situations for each other. It's, I think and it is different, Ed, you're right. It's called an out of order death. When you lose a child, when you lose a spouse, a young, when you lose a young person, it's an out of order death, and the brain kind of doesn't process it. You're like, how could this man who ran a marathon a couple months ago be dying? It just doesn't make sense to you. And we had this whole life plan together and future plan together. So it's this kind of cognitive dissonance where it just doesn't make sense. And it, it didn't for a long time. But, I'm a producer and been a producer many years, and I kind of went into that mode of, okay, what do we need to do? How do I need to make, this happen? How do I need to organize this? Who do I need to talk to? What's the best clinical trial? What's the best drug? How do I keep, track of all this? And it became my job, really, was, dealing with his illness and his health care. And, we had access to the best of the best. We were so blessed. I think so often about people who don't have health insurance or don't have access to that kind of medical care. And we realized how blessed we were with that. But even with that, it's very complicated to navigate the healthcare system, right, and how to do it. So that took up a lot of time. And then, I pretty much stopped working for that time period, and time kind of stood still, and my priority was taking care of him, which gave my life a purpose, and having as many beautiful moments together as we could, and the thing that I learned is that those did not involve going to our favorite restaurants or going to concerts or whatever. Some people, that is what they lean towards, but with us it was more just sitting quietly looking at the trees and the backyard, or meditating together or reading together. Very quiet kind of things. I mean, part of that was his personality, but I think part of it was that you almost want to slow time down. The trip in Europe was something that was just, it was kind of this magical short period of enchanted period, but then our day-to-day life was really trying to slow time down because we knew what was coming. And, I think, people do compare grief, and even, when people lose pets, they feel like they're not allowed to be grieving so much. But I think grief is grief, and you can't, whether it is your mother or my husband or someone's animal, it is a human response to the fact that you loved someone deeply. if you don't love someone deeply, you don't grieve. You feel sad,
Right.
you feel regret, you feel a lot of feelings. But grief, which I think is maybe one of, grief and love, I think are the two most profound emotions a human being can have. Grief is grief. And we, the biggest thing I learned is in a grief group that I was in, the therapist said, if you don't, let it in the front door, it's going to bang the back door down.
Right.
It is something that demands our attention.
Right.
And it demands to be expressed. If you don't express it and share it and feel it, it finds a way to get you in other ways that, I think prolong the process.
Beautifully stated. Thank you. You lost Scott the day before we shut down for COVID.
Unbelievable, right? Yeah.
And in your isolation at that point, that I must have driven you crazy. I cannot imagine what you would have thought having lost him so close to the shutdown. But a few days later, you started your very first work. I can't fathom that, but as you started your first work and you had all of these, you had his death, you had COVID, you had isolation, it was the perfect storm of darkness for you. What was going through your mind when you picked up the brush for the very first time and put brush to canvas?
Ed, I can't really fathom it, and I keep looking at what happened and talking about it, and it is kind of unfathomable to me even now because, he died at 11:50 on March 20th. My birthday is March 21st, so the next day was my birthday, and then the lockdown happened. We were in Laguna Beach. He came to love Laguna as much as I do.
Right.
And I didn't understand the pandemic. I was in this kind of state of shock and alternate universe. So I didn't quite get it. And, until I took a walk to downtown and all the, I'm sure everybody remembers, all the stores were closed.
Right.
Like I couldn't go to Zinc. I couldn't go to Laguna Coffee. I couldn't go to all my security places, that I've been going my entire life.
Right.
And there were no people, and my friends, everybody felt like they had to stay inside, and it was so isolating. I mean, thank God my son, who was studying in London, came to say goodbye to Scott, and he couldn't fly back. The airports were closed, so he was in LA but would stay with me in Laguna, and that was it. It was my 30-year-old son or 28-year-old son. So
Mac,
yeah,
okay.
Thank God for him. And so I really was alone, and I can't tell you exactly why, but I have a little desk, and I had a bunch of markers on the desk, and I don't remember why. I think it was from one of my kids' art projects or something, and my kids are grown-ups, so I don't know how old they were. I don't know what they were doing there. And I just took some paper and I started drawing shapes. I was afraid to use the markers, and I just started drawing shapes, like almost like mosaics with pencil, and a couple of them are in the show. And as soon as I started doing that, my mind, I was feeling like my brain was outside my body. I was like in an alternate universe or something. I just was completely disconnected. I think that's what shock is. And as soon as I was focusing on the art, I felt better. And time kind of, you go into the zone that
Right.
a lot of artists do, whether they're musicians or actors or painters, whatever. And then I started using different colors. And the people say to me, why didn't you do dark black colors because you were in grief? The beauty of the colors actually soothed my mind, I think, because I used a lot of bright colors, and I just started doing these shapes, and when I didn't know what they were, why I did them, but when I looked at them, I saw things in them once I was done. I saw a desire to stay alive, basically, or a rebirth. They had a lot of imagery, and if you look at my website, you'll see them, that I could see around births and life and growth. And so I think I was doing it. Well, then you say you would want to die. I did want to die, to be honest. And it gave me a message to myself of stay alive. And I thought, I want to do more and bigger. And I live next door to Noel from the our wonderful art store.
Right.
And he was trying to stay open a little bit, or let people, get stuff from the art store. So he, helped opened up for me, and I got some paints and canvas. And that was it. I just started painting, and I did not stop, and I did not look up how to paint on YouTube. I didn't, look at books. I didn't ask for lessons. I never thought that anyone would see them. And I painted basically to release and express the energetics, the feelings that were inside me. And it was the only time that I felt alive. The rest of the time, I felt like I was like The Walking Dead, a zombie.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And as I looked at your works, and you said you're going to share those first few here at the exhibit, each of your works looks like a different step in a long journey. And that's what I'm seeing when I look at your work. Each of them is a different step in this incredibly long journey that you're going to be on for a while. Imagining that Scott is in your heart for each of those creations is what I thought as I watch it. You've said that all art should be shared at one point. I remember reading this about you. Are there any works that are just too personal to share with the world yet?
There's a wonderful gallerist curator at the Harnacker, and
Genevieve
Williams, who's really just such a wonderful person and so gifted. And I did say to her, I kind of am hesitant to show what I call the first grief works, because I don't know, they felt so personal and they're so different, from the paintings. But, she kind of really helped me, and Peter Blake helped me as well, to realize that it's part of the story and it's part of the journey. And I'm actually glad that I'm sharing them, because to see that I did that 3 days after he died is, I hope, inspiring to people. And yes, I think as you pointed out, my very long career in a lot of movies, and being, with so many creative people, and being creative myself as a filmmaker, the creative process was not unfamiliar to me. It's everything to me. I always say, if I hadn't found the movie business, I don't know what the heck I'd be doing. There are many people in Laguna that the old timers are like, how the heck did she end up like that? I fired her from Taco Bell, like.
She couldn't fold the flour tortilla right.
Oh my God,
yeah.
there was a place, I don't know if anyone remembers, Carmel's Pie Shop in Boat Canyon. I was there briefly, a little restaurant. I'm talking, many 100 years ago, and I could not make change, and they thought I was stealing, which was just so embarrassing to me, and and I got in trouble for talking to everybody too long.
Right. People were just lining up when you were at the register.
Yeah.
Look, right. I'm going to get a bunch of change back here.
Yeah, I couldn't make change. I talked to everybody for too long. Anyway, I was fired from every job I ever had. Even after college, I tried to have normal jobs. I got fired from every job until I hit the movie business, and it just clicked for me. And, creativity has always been important to me. My father is an amazing jazz musician to this day. He's 96. He just did a concert last weekend in Canada, lives in Toronto. So my mother had been a dancer. So I grew up in a creative environment. Right. So I've always understood creativity and been drawn to creative people. But I saw myself as a facilitator for creative people. Okay. And I knew I was creative, and that helped me facilitate for directors, writers, actors. But to have a direct expression of my own creativity was really a revelation for me, and I saw that that direct expression is really what healed me, because it was the only place I could put those feelings. You know, if I had made a movie in a collaborative way, it probably would have helped, but not in this way. So, you know, when I hear people say like, "Oh, I'm not creative," or, you know, I tried to you know, do scrapbooking, or I tried to do ceramics, but I wasn't any good, or, you know, what I've discovered is that it's really the process and the act of doing it, and that it doesn't matter whether it's making banana bread. You know, I think that's why during the pandemic, everyone got more creative, because everyone was so scared and their lives felt empty all of a sudden. And what did people do? They turned to creativity. They renovated their houses, they gardened, they did all these things that I think was so beautiful. And looking back, I think it might be the universe saying, this is what you were created for, this is what you were made for. Don't compartmentalize it. Don't only work and be a hamster on a wheel doing all the things you think you're supposed to do. You know, what is your, you know, like what you're doing, Ed, like what is your, you know, what is your gift that you can bring to the world through creativity? And I, you know, I have learned with movies that there's a circle, you know, of creativity where you begin, you create something, and I don't think that circle is closed until it is shared. I think it's a built-in organic process that, like any, you know, like the waves going in and out with the tides, I think it's a natural organic process to share your creativity. And that could just be with your partner or your family. You know, it doesn't have to be to the world. I mean, for kind of circuitous reasons, you know, my creativity, that my paintings became seen. I met a local woman named Gianna Wurtzel who works with creative people and kind of their vision and how to bring it into reality. And because I'd had people in LA saw my paintings and kind of encouraged me or inquired about doing a show, and that didn't feel right to me. You know, Laguna is my heart, and I also think I'm a creative person because I grew up in Laguna Beach. It's, you know, it's in the DNA of this town to be creative and be an artist. So it felt right to me to do it here, and things just kind of fell into place to share it here, which is so meaningful to me.
Right. When you say that you facilitated for other creatives, just the list that I read off, the Edward Scissorhands, the Nightmare Before Christmas, Sisterhood of the those are just, and Ed Wood, those are all just incredibly imaginative, creative works. And yeah, of course, I could see where you would lend to those as well. Tell us, if you would, about Sela Care Farm.
Oh, thank you for that opportunity. When I read a lot, I did a very intentional grief journey. Not everyone does this, and that's okay, but I did it very intentionally. I've always been a meditator my whole life. I've done, you know, Buddhist meditation almost my whole life, and shared that with my husband, my adult life, I should say, and a lot. I was reading a lot of books about grief, and I found a book called Bearing the Unbearable by Joanne Cacciatore, and I highly recommend this book. At any point, no matter how many years have gone by. She's a professor at Arizona State, and she's a therapist and also Buddhist practitioner. And she has an animal activist. She has a farm outside of Sedona that where she has rescued abandoned and tortured animals, and she's found that having bereaved people be with these animals is one of the most healing things that you can do. And she also helps people, she does therapy with people in grief groups, and they can stay there. It's one of the most magical places. I really suggest people go on the website. There's a link in my website, but Selah, SELAH Care Farm, and make a you can make a donation in the name of the person you've lost. She suffered the loss of her baby years ago, and became kind of a grief activist. But that I went there twice, and that was a huge turning point for me in terms of my grief journey. And my proceeds from the show are going to go to Joanne and the Selah Care Farm, because I can't imagine what my journey would have been like without her and that place.
We'll include that link on our website as well.
Thank you.
I'll make sure that we do. You've said that you think we as a culture are in the dark ages in terms of grief. What do you mean by that?
I think that's true in general with mental health, mental illness, mental health, and it's particularly in our country. I think we're at the level of like using leeches, to cure disease. It's
you
just,
need a good bleeding, yeah.
Yeah. It's just incredible to me that, people can lose a parent or a loved one, any loved one or a spouse, and be expected to go to work, the day after the funeral.
Right.
Or that people are told the best remedy is to stay busy and not talk about it. And people are afraid to bring up, they are afraid they'll say the wrong thing, and talk about grief. It's just, it is so sad to me, because I know how much harder all those things make it. And not just me. I mean, studies, so many studies show, so many therapists will say that. One of the other book that helped me the most was Megan Devine's book, It's Okay, You're Not Okay. Because we feel like, in our culture, we feel that we have to be productive. That's the number one thing. Be productive, make money, have a good job, contribute to society in that way. And sometimes you can't be productive. Sometimes you have to stop being productive and give yourself time to process and to grieve. And I think that just has really, really hurt people. And I think, someone has bought a painting of mine this week and wrote a note to Genevieve, that she said, sometimes people have to share their feelings so that we feel that we can do the same thing. And that's really the goal that I have with this, is to open up the conversation, that, because people are talking to me about it so much and saying, I haven't talked about this for years, or they feel free to talk about it. And I wish that people felt like that with everyone. I wish everyone knew how to make others feel that they can share it, because true healing, I think, really comes from one human to another. I mean, I think nature heals, I think the ocean heals, I think art heals. But when you come down to it, it's sitting with another person who is there for you and gives you the space and the presence to share. I think it's so important, and people feel really, unfortunately, often uncomfortable with that.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that explanation. I've heard you talk about seeing Scott on the other side, and I'm curious, is that a necessary belief for you to hold in order to make it through each day?
Wow, that's a great question. I didn't know. I have to say, I didn't know what my paintings were really, and I had a lot of them. And when I first showed them to Gianna and to Jen, I said, well, they're all different. Most artists, their paintings are very similar. And in different ways, they both kind of said the same thing, was that it looked like I was trying to see the other side. And as soon as they said that, I thought, oh my gosh, that's exactly true. Because my biggest thing at the beginning was like, where did he go? And there's actually a grief book called Where Did You Go? And I think anyone who's lost someone has experienced that. Is like they're there one day, and then the next day they're evaporated, they're gone. And where does that person who's so ingrained in you, so merged with you, where do they go? We don't know, right? I mean, we'll never know. We have people who've had near-death experiences, and you know, I have my own beliefs about, you know, God and the afterlife and all of those things. Everyone has their own personal beliefs, but I think what we all share is we all wonder where they are,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And I had a sense or sensations of his presence. And I actually had some pretty major signs of his presence. Took after about a month. But I did believe, and it did help me, that his essence, his presence was with me. And I still believe that, and I still feel that. So I think my paintings were, you know, a way to kind of try to see the unseeable, try to look behind this veil that we live with, because there are other dimensions. We know that, right? And the whole, I'm not smart enough to understand quantum physics, but the little bit that I understand of Einstein's theory or the later theories, you know, there's much that we do not see.
Right.
So I just felt, you know, like what I don't see doesn't mean that he's not here in some way.
Beautifully stated. And it brings me to my next question, which was a tough one for me to formulate when I was getting ready for this. You had once described it, Scott was really from another world from you, different from another world, very, very different. If the circumstances were reversed and you had passed first, would Scott have dealt with your loss differently than you're dealing with his?
Wow, Ed, you asked such amazing questions. I have thought about that, actually. You know, he was my son called him stoic. He was a very quiet person, and he'd had a long history of struggles. You know, he had been an alcoholic in his earlier life. He had found the AA program. He'd found Buddhist meditation. He'd been on many, many retreats. He had studied. He had a very deep spiritual foundation, and he also, you know, he also had a wisdom in terms of life that was greater than mine, in that I can kind of be very affected by external circumstances and emotions, and you know, have my highs and lows. He was just steady as a rock, you know, and that was so great for me. So I think he would have found a way to live with it, with all of those qualities. But I think it would have been very, very difficult for him, because we both felt like we had never experienced this kind of relationship, you know. So I think it would have been, and he said that, you know, so many times, that he was so grateful to have found this and the kind of relationship that we had. But in some ways, I think he might have dealt with it better than I did, because he had that kind of, he was just a rock, you know, that type of person. I mean, people say that to me, but I think I have access to that, but I have to work very hard to be that way.
Okay. Well, thank you for the honesty in that answer. I really appreciate that. Since you started painting, has the painting or your your process of painting, has that enhanced your work as a producer and a director? And if so, how has it enhanced that?
Oh, yeah. Because I think it's enhanced my life. I mean, I remember reading early on in my grief journey that people were grateful for experiencing grief. I was like, what the heck, I could not understand that, but I do now. I am grateful that I have had this experience because I feel like there was my life before Scott's death and after. And before Scott's death, I cared about all the dumb things. I was focused on all the superficial things, and is my movie going to be a hit? Am I going to go on this vacation? Are my kids going to mess up or do this or that? And, just the minutia of life was very important to me. And that changed with his death. His death completely reoriented my value system and my view of life in such a great way. And things that I had never noticed before, I notice now. I would walk to town in a rush talking on the phone here. And now I look at every plant, every flower. I look at the sky. I look at every house. I try to talk to everybody I pass by. It's just every moment is precious. And I forget, we all do, but I don't forget that often. It really changed the way I look at life. And therefore, my work, when I'm working with people, like I really try to I feel like everything that happens is for my highest good, that then I have to look at everything that way. And in terms of the creativity of my, I just did this show for FX called The Veil, and it was important to me for reasons beyond the show. There's deeper meaning to it that I would not have understood before Scott died. So it's informed every aspect of my life. And I'm just recently met a wonderful man, and it was the first relationship I've had in the 4.5 years since Scott died. And I'm looking at that so differently than I even did when I met Scott. How precious it is to have human connection and find someone that you can connect deeply with is the greatest gift there is, So I just value everything so much more.
Right. So this coming Saturday, when the exhibit opens up and people wander in and they look at your art, what is it you want them to feel when they see your work?
The wonderful thing is that people are expressing to me and they're feeling exactly what I was praying for. And the reason I'm doing this is they say several things, and one I didn't expect, that they are inspired that, as you opened with, that beauty can come from grief. I really am a strong believer in that and sharing that message. And that you can heal. It never goes away. It never heals like a wound heals where you're like, oh, I don't even know it's there anymore. Right. It's always there in every moment for the rest of your life. I lost my mother at 19. I still cry about my mother, It never goes away, but if you nurture it, take care of it with compassion and love, it almost turns into a diamond. Like I used to feel that it was a wound in my heart, and then it's become like a beautiful jewel in my heart. It's still there, but you grow into gratitude for the person and for the experience. And I hope the art gives that message. And then so many people are saying to me, wow, this has inspired me to either be creative or do something new later in life. Because I think we feel like, oh, we're doing this, we're doing this thing all our lives, our job or whatever, and that's who I am and that's what I do. And for me to make all these movies and all of a sudden be an artist and have a show, I think people think, wow, maybe I could do something new. I can open myself up to something new. So that's a wonderful thing I've heard from people too.
A diamond is only created with tremendous pressure.
Exactly.
Right.
That's right.
Beautiful. The exhibit opens up this coming Saturday, August 10th at the Honeckar Foundation over on Broadway. It runs through September 14th. I could not be more delighted that we had this conversation today.
Me too.
Denise Di Novi, thank you so very much for stepping in, and I look forward to doing this again.
Oh, anytime. You're a wonderful interviewer, and we're so grateful for your service to Laguna. It's so great.
And we're grateful for you and this conversation. Thank you, Denise Di Novi.
Thank you.
All right. 8:42 the time, 18 minutes before 9 o'clock. It's the Mornings with Ed show.